Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Shinzen virtual trade show. I'm so happy you're joining us today. I am Melissa Gibson. I'm a Chief Operating Officer for Shinzen. We're a business-to-business marketplace for sourcing sustainable textiles. And I am so lucky today to have Andrew Wyatt with us. He's been generous enough to spend some time with me today just talking about who he is, his amazing mission with CALA, and just learning more about him. So I wanted to welcome Andrew. Andrew, say hi to everybody.
Hey everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Andrew Wyatt, CEO and co-founder at CALA, and we make technology that help people build, scale, and really just run their fashion business.
Yeah, Andrew, tell us a little bit more about CALA and your mission, kind of how you got started, what drove you to this, because your starting point is quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, our mission at CALA is to empower creators everywhere by bringing them together. And when we say creators, it's not just, the designers and sort of the creative folks. We also see our network of tech designers and manufacturers and fulfillment centers as creators as well. Maybe they're creating the actual physical products themselves versus just the designs. My background is actually in technology. I was the first employee and head of operations for a startup called Ship. And Ship was kind of like Uber for shipping.
Mhm.
And what that helped me kind of realize is this amazing new world where people can use tools like Shopify or Amazon or Etsy to run their own businesses and use tools like Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok to market those businesses. And it really got me excited about the future and more tools that make it even easier and more democratized in the fashion space.
And so how did that lead you to kind of conceptualizing CALA? Like, how did you get, what were, the steps to get you to where you are today? Give us a little
So
like dates and a little more context about,
yeah,
what it.
so rewind back to 2016, I knew there was an opportunity. I didn't know anything about the space. So in a lot of ways, I was kind of an emerging designer. And so I did what I thought was best, which is I went to Makers Row. I tried to get in contact with every manufacturer in LA I could find, hopped on a plane down to LA, tried to meet a bunch of them with this great idea I had on kind of a platform that makes it really easy to produce, and basically got kind of shooed out the door by about 20 of them. But one of them thought it was interesting, and it was actually through that experience that I met this woman who is kind of like a production manager, if you will. She introduced me to the whole kind of underworld of manufacturing in LA, and was kind of my first foray into how this whole thing works. And one key reflection from that first phase of the business was that whoever has a website is typically not the best manufacturers. A
Mhm,
lot of the great ones, especially in LA, are kind of a text message or phone only thing. And
mhm.
so one of the things that I ran into there is they were more than happy to help me for a $2,000 a month retainer,
Yeah,
and they were able to introduce me to a tech designer who was able to help me for $1,000 per tech design, and they were able to introduce me to a pattern maker who's able to help me for $500 or $800 a pattern, and they were helping and so you can kind of see where the issue was for in my case a new designer is
right,
there's a lot of people that will take your money, and so it becomes pretty complicated to get going.
right. So, so I guess on CALA, you're really working with smaller like startups, or I know that you have some, mid-size or more enterprise brands looking at you too. So tell me about who you're working with right now.
Yeah, so to break into the industry, you obviously have to build credibility. And the way that our platform works is firstly, it's design and collaboration tools, but then it's also a marketplace network of factories and fulfillment centers and ghost designers and things like that. So of course, we had to kind of start with small brands.
Mhm.
That was really our focus for the first couple years. Helping them, and our whole kind of long-term vision is around just an MOQ of one. And so it's really important for us to offer no MOQs, and really enable people to produce only what they think they can actually sell. And so really had an initial traction around small brands, but what we sort of developed over the next 2 years is the ability to um, not just service the small brands, but also service people that want to start brands from scratch, but maybe they already have an audience because they're a celebrity or an influencer,
Mhm.
or a big brand that is looking to do a quick turnaround capsule collection or a collaboration, and they don't want to push it through their existing supply chain that's already stretched super thin. And so that's kind of how we've evolved, starting small, really focused on, just making it really easy to create products, and then, kind of expanding our customer base from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, most of my background is sourcing. I come from over 15 years working with, a $2 billion fashion brand, and I can really appreciate, when I first learned of CALA and really saw what you were accomplishing there. Even larger brands can absolutely, can really, be enabled by what you can do there because, like you said, they're so kind of, I don't want to say tunnel vision, but they're very focused on who they work with already. And kind of, like you said, all of those, those manufacturers, it's word of mouth, it's who's working with who. But for when you're on your site, it's so black and white. The options are there. You kind of do all of the hard work. It's pretty amazing. What's supporting the digital space? Like who's on your team to help really inform the sourcing expertise there?
So our team is very intentionally kind of split in half. And one side is, best in class product and engineering from, a lot of us came from San Francisco initially. So building with, WebGL and like GraphGL and, all the latest technology on one side. And then
Mhm.
on the other side, we have our head of operations came from Yeezy. She did Yeezy season 1 through 4, was at Alexander Wang for 3 years after that. And we have teams from, anthropology and uh, Supreme, and, kind of all the wide range of different brands. And so what that does is it brings us together, and not only, do we have the relationships and the resources to make great product, but we also have the tech team that can actually build the experience and quickly iterate on it, based on the feedback that we're getting from our customers and from our internal team.
Yeah, I met with a couple members from your team. I was really impressed with their level of expertise, but also the level of flexibility that CALA can bring to, the larger brands. I know that working at a larger brand, like I mentioned before, it's kind of hard to get, quotes outside who you're already working with. And there's so many layers and so much red tape that you really offer a more flexible, approach to that. So you said you started about in 2016, so it's been 4 years. How was 2020 for CALA? Tell us about the last year. Everyone has a different story for this last year, especially
Absolutely.
regarding their business. So what did 2020 look like for CALA?
So I think 2020 for anyone, it was either really good or really bad. And I think if you zoom that out on even a larger level, I think 2020 is really bad if you're a big company
Mm,
with tons of retail locations and tons of inventory and big sort of, POs out. But for people that are small, it's actually an amazing opportunity because now, when you have a sort of black swan event, it's a chance for the deck to kind of be reshuffled. And so what our biggest reflection was that the of course there's supply chain disruptions, and I think more than any time people are now realizing that you have to have redundancy in your supply chain. So
yeah.
the old kind of, adage of I just want to find one good factory is no longer sufficient to be successful. And so for Cala, I initially have modeled our network off of how Zara's networked, so sort of one big factory, lots and lots of little factories.
Mhm.
And so we did that for the inspiration of bringing product to market more quickly because we're not trying to put stuff through the same queue. What ended up happening though last year is that the net result of that is that we had very little supply chain disruptions. So we automatically shifted volume away from China due to Chinese New Year. And so a lot of our Chinese factories were closed while we were having, big productions finishing in India and Portugal and Italy and the US. And then as the pandemic spread and those locations started to shut down around April or May, then some of our capacity from our Chinese factories were starting to come back online. And
Mhm.
so, despite the fact that everyone was making a lot of PPE, we were still able to enable our brands to bring product to market, with really like a 2 to 4 week delay only. And I think if you look at that relative to some other clients, or some other, businesses that had pretty massive disruptions, we feel pretty fortunate about that. And so that's kind of, you know, or compounded our conviction in this model of, having this sort of network approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope that there are, some larger brands and some people that work in, the sourcing departments for larger brands that are watching this, because I think that people overlook, especially the larger brands overlook the importance of flexibility and shorter lead times and speed to market. And instead, they're very driven on the best cost and the tightest cost. But with that, you're locked and loaded, and you can't really make changes. And in such a such a trying year like 2020, where we didn't know what was happening day to day and week to week, and what the rules would be and what the expectations would be and what sales would be, and nothing could have been predicted. I think um, that you guys absolutely have that nailed down as far as, what does flexibility look like and how do we offer that to our customers. How do you think that's, when we're talking about larger brands, but what about the smaller startups and the designers and the influencers like you mentioned before?
So it's been, I think, in aggregate, great for small brands.
Mm,
What the pandemic has done is it's forced innovation in direct to consumer and sort of adoption of direct to consumer and e-commerce. I believe the Toby from Shopify said that, we're 10 years ahead of where we expected to be by this point in time as far as, the adoption of e-commerce. So that's amazing for small brands, because on the internet, one website versus another website, it's impossible to know if it's two people sitting in a room or 2,000 people in a huge global organization. So that's a huge advantage. And if you look at the tech industry, a lot of the tech industry success has been predicated on, in a tech only or a sort of an online only environment, you can look as legit as possible despite being, a small team. I think that's a supreme advantage for, the consumers, is, or for small brands, is that consumers are now, buying everything online.
mm,
So that's a big advantage. I think from a supply chain advantage, it's perhaps getting a little bit more difficult. So, if you can't go to the sample room in LA because of COVID, that's obviously making it a little bit more complicated. If you can't fly, let's say you already have a global network and you can't fly to, Milan to review your samples, that's complicated. Or even if are already communicating, just sending all the information back and forth between factories, is more complicated. And so what I'm also seeing is, like, there's sort of two responses to this sort of change in the world. One is higher minimums, and factories want to work with even less customers, which
right.
obviously is a losing battle. Or there's openness now to, oh well, we used to only do 500 minimum. All those customers are gone. All right, let's try doing 100. And so I think that it's tough right now, probably for small brands, but I think the longer term effect is going to be a continued shift towards, smaller and smaller production and quicker turnarounds.
Yeah. So um, just picking at that a little bit more, what I liked what you said before about the kind of the digital space can offer you the opportunity to fake it till you make it, right? So
Absolutely.
so what would you tell the smaller brands or people starting out about the importance of, just your digital presence at least?
I think it's everything. One sort of truth that I hold that no one agrees with me on is that, um, product and design is not the most important thing in fashion.
Yeah.
I believe it's distribution and customer acquisition. And
Mhm.
so you can see brands that are making kind of crappy product, but they have clear distribution, whether it's through an influencer or a price point that they've built an audience. They can win and they have volume, and that gives them the ability to do whatever they want. And so when people come to me and are like, oh, I'm starting my brand, I'm like, oh cool, like where's your website? Oh, I don't have one yet. Okay, well, what domain are you going to use? Oh, I don't know. Do you have the Instagram set up? No, we don't. But look at my designs. I paid someone $10,000 to design this whole collection. I'm usually like, ah, and that's kind of the things that you know, I see like a lot of designers failing on is like, spending a lot of money, but getting the sequence wrong.
Right. Knowing your audience, what's your platform, right? What do you think what's the biggest lesson you learned this last year?
So I think the biggest lesson for us was, around what customers we want to service in the new year. So, we're pretty darn good at making product now. So it's about like, where do we want to put our resources when it comes to our own user acquisition? So we spent the bulk of 2020 prioritizing influencers and celebrities and people that had millions of followers. And one of the things we walked away with is realizing that followership and even engaged followership does not always result in guaranteed sales. So, we've been able to now understand, some people with big audiences and great engagement, it's because they're a great dancer and people just love following them because of that entertainment value, not because they're actually influencing their purchase decisions. And
Mhm.
on the flip side, someone with a small audience and decent engagement can do incredible on sales, and it's just because it's the type of relationship that they have with their audience. And
Mhm.
so going into 21, one of our big focuses is going to be on people that come in with some level of historical sales, whether it's a collaboration or merch or a few collections and seasons where they've been just slogging it. What that shows us is that people have an understanding of, one, what does product development look like, what is that experience of getting your first production run in, and two, what kind of efforts do they have to put into promotion to actually get products out the door and sell. And so that's one of the things that we're focusing on this year is, people are coming in with some sort of sales experience.
Yeah. Um, I think you touched on this a little bit before, but what do you think that these new brands are starting, that are starting off, what are they really challenged with? And how do you what do you suggest that they prioritize? Like I said, I think you mentioned some of it before, but what do they prioritize as far as where do they spend money? Because the funds are probably not a lot. Where do they spend their resources? Where do they spend their energy? What are their challenges and how should they prioritize?
There's a ton of challenges. I met with a young designer who's one of the CFDA award designers,
Mhm.
and he said he's actually shut down his brand now. And he said the worst part about my current position is that I listen to all the advice that all of the mentors and advisors in the industry told me to do, and my business is gone now. And so I think that's one of the trickiest parts for new designers is like understanding who to listen to. And please don't do a fashion show, you know? And I think like what we sort of see is like the biggest and the most difficult part for people that are starting new brands is like the person themselves becomes the single point of failure.
Mm.
So, you are trying to build your website, you're trying to do your own tech design, you're trying to do your own patterns, you're trying to, go to Mood and shop your own fabric. You're trying to, take that fabric to your sample room. You're trying to take the samples to your photo studio. You're trying to, walk your samples into a factory and convince them to do a number of units for you. You're packing all of the boxes and shipping them to your customers yourself. You become your own fail point, and there it becomes this kind of unfortunate sort of time disparity where, um, you know I think everyone has something that they're good at. We call this at CALA their zone of genius. So everyone has your zone of genius. Unfortunately, what we see with a lot of designers is that they spend 90% of their time outside of their zone of genius, but they feel like it's cheaper or more effective or more efficient to do it that way. Or they feel like they need to, in order to have control, they have to touch everything themselves. And I think that's where we see most people, ultimately fail.
Yeah. Yeah, trying to wear all hats and then
Exactly.
the jack of all trades, master of none. So,
So then the question becomes, well, okay, Andrew, like I don't have $100,000 to, hire a bunch of people. And that's kind of where, people sort of end up. They're like, oh, I either have to do it all myself or I have to have a ton of money. I don't have investors. And
mhm,
that's where I do think there's all of these amazing opportunities that the internet provides via platforms, like CALA, but even like Fiverr
mhm,
or Upwork. if you want to pay someone to give you 20 different logo ideas, you could spend days doing that yourself, or you could pay someone $5 on Fiverr.
Right.
I think it's about information and understanding, and trying to spend the bulk of your time and effort planning and strategizing, like, and reviewing what is my tool set. Even if I have very small budget, what's my tool set that's out there that I can have access to? Maybe you can't pay someone to design, but you can go on Dribble and you can see a million different examples of people that have done sites that are similar to what you do. And so that's kind of where I would like to see, is like people spend more time, understanding what they have and then executing, versus just putting their head in the ground and just every day after day after day, just grinding it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, there's so much available at their fingertips right now between, something like CALA, where they can go on and find a manufacturer and find the right sourcing partners, even on Shins and B, where they can find, you can find the fabrics you're looking for and the suppliers you're looking for there based on, the type of qualities you're looking for, your sustainable mission. I mean, there's so much available right now compared to, 20 years ago when I started. None of that existed
Even
online.
5 years
Like,
ago. I
no,
mean,
yeah.
one of the craziest moments for me, I remember, is I finally got connected with this huge trims supplier
Mhm,
in China. And
mhm.
and so I sent them an email. I'm like, cool, like send me, like, I'd love to review, like send me what you have. And they're
Yeah,
like, we can't. We don't have like a catalog. Like, what
right,
do you want? I'm like,
right,
well, I don't know what I want. Like, and they're like,
right.
well, send us what you want, and we'll be able to find it and quote it for you. And it was just this weird thing. I'm like, wait, on Amazon, I can log in and I can see a gajillion products of everything. And in
Mhm,
fashion, if I want to see 5 different types of zippers, I have to know which 5 zippers I want to see
right,
first. It was just this crazy thing, and I think that's what a huge innovation that Shenzhen B has created is, what fabrics even exist. Well, now there's a place where you can go and you can search and you can see. And I think that is a step change, innovation that's happened even just in the last like couple of years.
yeah. So speaking of technology, what exciting things do you have going on at CALA? Can you give us some insider information on new fun things you have coming up?
Absolutely. So, what we've now done at CALA is basically built the technology and the network in a way that a single person can by themselves launch and scale and make hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in revenue. And so what that looks like is, we started with just the ability to upload a sketch, instantly get pricing via our pricing algorithm that we built. And then
That is so cool, by the way.
press the
That
button.
showed
Yeah,
me that
press the
before. That
button.
is really, really impressive. It's really cool.
Thank you.
I really geek out with that coming with, from a sourcing background. And I just think that feature is just unbelievable.
Absolutely. The ability to, look at what 57 units would cost relative to 67 units, or to see, okay, maybe I start with 50 units, but if sales are good, I'm going to do 300 units, and to know up front how that pricing already looks, I think is a huge tool, and everyone loves it. And of course, the fact that it's total landed as well is great, because then, like, all right, this is my cost, I add my margin, and boom, that's it. You don't have to, hop into QuickBooks.
Mhm.
But now we've also added in, direct to consumer fulfillment. And in our CALA platform will actually plug into a Webflow e-commerce site or a Shopify e-commerce site. So your data from CALA automatically pushes to your storefront. And as your customers order, it automatically flows through and gets packed and shipped by one of our 3PL partners and sent directly to your customers in like an Amazon level of time, 1 or 2 days. We've now started also supplementing with a network of ghost designers. So maybe you have an idea, a brilliant marketing idea, and you know
Mm.
what kind of product you want, but you don't have the technical experience to design it, or you want someone to do the research for you. We have a network of ghost designers from places like Balenciaga all the way to, Victoria's Secret and Nike. And so based on what your needs are, we can pair you with a ghost designer. Another kind of big innovation is around having our technical design network. And so you could, just put up a pretty raw idea. I like this, but I want this and want that, and submit it. And then it'll actually go through a professional tech designer. And that's included in the price that we quote you with our pricing algorithm, so that by the time you get to the manufacturer, everything's spec'd out and is the exact same format that the factory needs to execute quickly. So what
Wow,
this
that's
in
cool.
aggregate does is it enables you as an individual to focus in your zone of genius and, outsource the rest. So we have some clients that have amazing technical designers on staff. Great. Upload that and you're ahead of the game. Or some people that already have their own materials and want to actually just need someone to help with cut and sew. And so we can sort of help in a myriad of ways, and really with this back to our mission of like empowering the creator instead of the creator being the sad person that is shopping their designs at a flea market or something, like giving them the platform in which they can actually give it a fair try.
Yeah, that's amazing. The tech design thing, or any even the ghost designers, that's great for existing brands where they have maybe a silo of product, and like maybe they just focus on men's, but they're thinking like, hey, we could have a women's following too, and they want to at least try it out. They can really utilize that to expand an existing business into an even bigger business. It doesn't have to even just be starting from scratch, which is really
Absolutely.
impressive.
And I think the old model is, I talked to some friends that worked at Everlane. It's like, well, when Everlane wanted to launch men's, they hired a men's knit top designer and a
Right.
men's, woven bottoms designer, and then a technical corresponding person. And so to launch one product line, you hire 4 or 5 people at, 80 to $120,000 salaries. It's like, no wonder it's hard to expand. No wonder these companies, end up being, tens of thousands of employees. And so, to be able to test, like you said, without adding a single headcount, and to do it at an effective price point, I think that's really going to unlock a whole new wave of innovation. And even within product categories, like we just launched candles. So, any direct-to-consumer brand that's, selling contemporary men's or women's clothing could easily launch in your own custom branded candle. Like it's just a nice, beautiful, sort of extension. And it's the same exact thing as designing a t-shirt on CALA.
That's amazing. So that actually that's another question I have for you. So for Ancala, I just assumed it was all apparel, but do you have accessories? I know candles are like, home furnishing, but what about accessories and handbags and shoes? Are you enabled for that as well?
Yep. So jewelry, fashion jewelry, we brought on about a year ago. So we've been doing some really amazing stuff there, and accessories, bags, backpacks, totes, leather goods, really footwear, slides. We've been doing a ton of slides, socks, tons of socks, hats, knit hats. The only thing that we haven't done yet that I'm a sneakerhead myself, so
Mhm.
we haven't done sneakers yet, and
Okay.
and we're really, that's the one area where when it comes to lasts and size runs, you really need kind of like a 50K investment to like do it properly. And
Mhm.
so of course through our Yeezy connections, we have the supply chain, but we're just trying to find the right brand or individual to kind of kick that supply chain
Pleasure.
off with.
Yeah. I bet the next time we talk, you'll be like, oh yeah, we did sneakers last year
I'll
and
be, I'll
we
be
got
wearing
it
it, hopefully.
done. We can't keep up with you. You're so quick. It's really inspiring.
Thank you.
So I don't want to keep you too much longer. I could really talk to you all day. I have so many other questions for you, but I guess we'll save it for maybe a second version, or for our next show. Maybe we'll bug you to come on again.
Okay.
To wrap up, can you give me some tips for people that are watching that have an idea, or they're just getting started, or maybe they've started and they want to change direction? Can you give us like your top tips, just given the experience that you have, the last few years working with, all types of startups and people starting new ventures?
Absolutely. So my first one is start with why. So, understand and why, because you want to launch a brand is not a why. Or at least it could be a why, but if that's your why, then maybe you should think about another why. But really like start with why am I bringing more product into the world? What is my unique perspective on this? And who's my audience? Equal as important as why. Those are the two most critical things to have mapped out, ideally before you spend a dollar,
Mhm.
because that needs to guide everything you do. What is my distribution going to be? Do I already have this audience? Do I need to build this audience? What is my audience's willingness to pay? What does my audience prioritize? Do they prioritize sustainability? I can't tell you, like every single designer that comes to us, especially like the younger they are, the
Yeah.
more they're emphatic about how it needs to be 100% cradle to grave sustainable.
Mhm.
but they don't have an audience that's willing to pay for that. And so we're constantly seeing people build these amazingly beautiful, sustainable products, but it's a hoodie that sells for $120 and no one buys it.
Mhm.
So, that kind of first phase, that foundation, think about it like building your fashion brands, like building a house, like a fashion house. If you don't have a strong foundation of, why you're doing this and who you're doing it for, everything else is going to kind of be wobbly. And the bigger you build it, the easier it'll be to crash. The second kind of major tip I would say is to start small and optimize for sell through, not lost sales.
Mhm.
So, I hear a lot of people are like, oh, well, I need to have a complete collection. So I need to have 15 styles and blah, 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 because I want it to look good in the way I style it. And the problem there is, doing 15 styles, if you imagine, 300 units per style and, anywhere from 10 to $30 per unit, that's 50,000, if not $100,000 in upfront cost before you even validated, your why or your audience. And so, we encourage people start with one product,
Mhm.
and only make 50. And there's like the concern about like there being more people that want it than you than have the products. Like, great, that's
Great
hype.
problem.
Have you ever heard of Supreme? Like, that's what they do, is they make less than they know they can sell, and then more people want it. Versus the average new designer brand has a website or a collection that they show with 20 styles and no sales.
Mhm.
The third is, and this is a complicated one, but figure out how to hack scale. So, if you're following the second rule of starting small, then that means that you're going to be doing lower units, your margins are going to be less. If your paid marketing budget is only $100, it's going to be less efficient than someone that's doing 10,000 because Facebook's going to show the best people those ads. So you have to figure out how to hack scale. And so the way to do that is, buying, going in with another designer on some fabric, or doing, going in on a collaboration with another brand, to get, more units and tap into their audience as well. Looking at, instead of hiring a technical designer, how can, you find one that's potentially working for another brand but needs, more work and is willing to do stuff on the side, so you can get great work but without having to pay for the whole thing. And then obviously, like, the most, obvious way to do this is to use CALA, of course, because our, we work with over 100 different brands, and so all of everything that we offer you is at that level of discounted price. So our cut and sew pricing is through the lens of our 100 brands and all of their volume. Our technical designers are amazing, and they're getting, a full-time work because of all of our different brands. Same thing with our fulfillment and shipping. Our shipping rates are, dramatically larger than even like a large fashion brand today, because we're aggregating all this together. And so what that means for you day one as a small brand is that you're not paying the piper and all of the way that you sort of lose money initially, and you're getting good margins and an efficient supply chain at a very inexpensive cost.
Amazing. Those are, I hope everyone like goes back and replays this 10 times and, takes notes. And I think that the experience that you've had is really, it just kind of beams out of you. The business, it's not, you're not like just a fashion sourcing house. You have so much business savvy and business knowledge. I know that anybody that watches this will really gain some really great insight and more than just tips, but like true, wholehearted advice of, just the bare basics of how to make it right now, in 2021 and in the next few years of, supporting, getting themselves, set up digitally, having, alternative routes to figure out, to solve problems. And you guys are definitely the solution for so many of those, those startup problems. So thanks for spending time with us, Andrew. It was such a pleasure to ask the questions I've been wanting to ask you since the first time I met you. Like I said, I still have some more to ask, but we'll have to schedule that for another time. Hopefully you'll spend more time with us for our next show. But thanks for joining today, and thanks for all your great information.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. I'm really excited about the Shenzhen the virtual show, and glad to be a part of it. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Take care. Bye, everyone.